Part 46. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 453. Sealed Land. Fang Xian didn't know how much time had passed. However, the will of the stick's existence has been completely defeated by Nicholas. After all, this is Nicole's home field. At this time, he only occupied less than 20% of the entire universe. The real test is coming. He waited intently. The next moment, Nicole's huge will suddenly charged, and countless tentacles spread. The extreme madness and chaos instantly overwhelmed Fang Xian's mind. Nicolia really has no reason, he is a complete lunatic, and there is only instinct and madness in his consciousness. Fang Xian's consciousness was quickly infused with madness. That's not too bad. Perhaps it was because he had been strengthened to a certain extent by staying in this conscious universe for a long time, so his mind did not collapse at the moment of contact with Nicola. Even so, the extreme madness surged, almost drowning his heart. In the midst of this madness, he seemed to see the truth of the universe. The original creator created the entire universe, and immediately split into one after another the ancient rulers. Nicolia is just one of all the ancient rulers. This is the highest level secret belonging to the rulers, and besides that, there is also the name of the blind and ignorant God. His name is Boom. Just remembering, Fang Xian's consciousness instantly shattered and was crushed into powder. No way, even if I occupy 20% of the ocean of consciousness while the two major rulers are competing, I'm still too weak to face Nicola. If the opponent's consciousness is steel, Fang Xian's consciousness is just a ball of cotton, not even counted, it's a big difference. Moreover, there are several times the gap in quantity. This led to the fact that once the existence in the sticks failed, he would not be able to fight back in the face of Nicola's crazy infiltration. Consciousness is retreating steadily, and in an instant, it will be completely silent. This time, are you really going to die? Fang Xian thought lightly. He was not surprised by death, and had already been mentally prepared. It is nothing to die in the pursuit of eternal life. At this moment, a glimmer of fluorescence appeared in front of his eyes. It's the property bar. This pitfall actually emerged and turned into a reef in the huge waves, resisting the attack of a huge wave. The seventh level of an alchemist should be the true spirit level. The true spirit is immortal, and the alchemist will last forever? Is this a majestic power parallel to the gods? A large group of information emerged, which made Fang Xian feel a little enlightenment. The immortal true spirit, mysterious, undoubtedly surpasses the existence of the immortal primordial spirit. And the attribute bar actually has the characteristics of an immortal true spirit, guarding my last ounce of will? This golden finger had a mysterious origin, he didn't know how it suddenly appeared on him, maybe it had something to do with the time travel in the first life. However, it is hidden so deep that it cannot be touched without extraordinary power, and it only provides a little bit of digitalization and increasing understanding. It was only now that the truly terrifying side was revealed. There is no good in the world for no reason, my golden finger, who gave it to me? What purpose? Fang Xian had a vague guess in his heart. At this time, relying on the help of the attribute bar, he realized the path of the seventh level alchemist. This time, he really saw the hope of breaking out. Rumble. Within the sea of consciousness, Nicola's tentacles are still attacking wildly, but relying on the attribute bar, Fang Xian has always maintained a trace of sanity, and has not fallen into a state of complete extinction and madness. With the passage of time, the two wills began to infect each other, and even began to merge. Hopkins King's divine art can only be considered a real success at this point. Fang Xian may be the only successful one in this world. But, after the fusion is successful, even if I am promoted to level 7, I will be crazy. Fang Xian sensed his body. It was a majestic, indescribably terrifying body with no fixed form. Of course, at this time, he gradually took on a human form, but there were still a large number of tentacles spreading from everywhere. In addition, it is the extremely terrifying dark power that is mastered in this body. That is the power that can almost destroy a planet and change the universe. I'm lucky. The gods in this world are not only sealed, but they also don't have reason. My reason can directly replace its will. Otherwise, I would never have made it this far. But, I accepted everything about Nicholas, and I became him. In the future, the crazy emotions will dominate me most of the time, and only for a very short time can I barely regain a little sanity. This kind of promotion, is it what I want? At the cost of almost complete madness, being promoted to a 7th level existence is indeed a great loss. Fang Xian felt that he was about to fall into madness, and many tentacles danced wildly, slapping the seal constantly. "Gli! Wake me up!" In an instant, he roared in his heart. With the help of the dark power at the level of the ancient ruler, the calamity power of the 6th level alchemist quickly emerged in his body, completely breaking through the limitation of the extinction period. A light curtain emerged. Name, Fang Xian, Luo Ka. Occupation, alchemist, level 6, primordial ruler. Spirit : Inspiration : Sanity, 1, 0 100. Spells: Immortal Psalm, Bird with Broken Wings, Hymn to Worms, Secret Key of the Door. Alchemy, Mysterious View of De Luo Cave, 9 Transformations of Gangshat. The 6th level of Alchemist is the extinction of calamity. As for the 7th level, it will naturally no longer fail to sense it. This is brute force breaking the game. Of course, the price paid is also huge. However, for many transcendental beings, perhaps most of them are willing to try if they can truly become gods at the cost of losing their sanity. But, in the name of the evil god, living in this universe as a monster is not what I want. Taking advantage of the last sliver of reason, Fang Xian looked at the attribute bar, where a symbol formed by a reincarnation disc resurfaced. Reincarnation can be opened. At the beginning, when Jelly ran away violently, I had to mortgage the reincarnation disc, so I didn't die directly. Now that Jelly has recovered, the reincarnation disc and the reincarnation function have returned. Fang Xian did not choose reincarnation. After all, the breakthrough this time is too great. The power of the 7th level is a change of his true spirit, and it will not disappear just because of reincarnation. He himself has mutated and become a member of the indescribable existence. All I can do is transform. Following the previous world, refining martial arts immortality and turning it into alchemist immortality is the same. This time, I need to transform the power of the ancient ruler into the power of an alchemist, and truly break through to the 7th level of an alchemist. And, it is the 7th level of De Luo. Fang Xian roared angrily, "Gli! Transform it for me." In an instant, the tribulation power in his body surged, and with the support of the power of the ancient ruler, it became hundreds or thousands of times violent, and began to break through the shackles of the 7th level alchemist. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 454. It was midsummer, and the rainstorm had just stopped. Pearl-like drops of water hang down from the verdant green leaves. The forest path was suddenly noisy, and a convoy slowly approached, breaking the tranquility. Dozens of knights in dark clothes and with long knives on their waists guarded several carriages. Each of their temples was raised high, obviously they were all masters in the world. Click. The wheel of the carriage in the center suddenly tilted and fell into a puddle, causing the carriage to shake. Snapped. The carriage seemed to be extremely heavy, and the sudden appearance made the horses pulling the carriage whine. Not only that, but the axle split and the wheels flew off. The carriage rolled to the ground, causing the things inside to roll out. That is a huge iron cage. Inside the iron cage was a brown, giant pupa. Not good. Stop. Fix quickly. A few carriages in front stopped, and a young man helped an old man with white beard and hair to get out of the carriage and came to inspect it. The old man's name is Zhang Yuhe, and he is the royal official of Xian Wukuo. The young man supporting him is named Zhang Tao, his grandson. Is this the chrysalis man? Zhang Tao seemed to be seeing this giant chrysalis for the first time, and his eyes lit up. I finally saw the real, living weirdness. Master Yi, fix the carriage and get on the road quickly. This item must be delivered to the capital before the Queen Mother's birthday banquet, and there is no room for loss. Zhang Yuhe said. Please rest assured, my lord. A middle-aged swordsman replied with a smile. His eyebrows are sharp like a knife, and his face is firm and resolute. It is Yi Wuji who is the great wind saber in the Jianghu martial arts world. There is also a big name, with a gust of wind and sand knife. He has defeated 18 martial arts masters in a row, and he has hacked to death several strange heads, and he is famous in Xian Wukuo. Therefore, although he was hired by Zhang Yuhe, the imperial historian, he was not a servant, but more like a guest. The other guards stepped forward to repair the carriage. The young Zhang Tao was outside the iron cage, his eyes were bright, he clicked his tongue, and he refused to leave for a long time. This is the pupa man in Andong County. I heard, when this weirdness first appeared, it was the work of a crazy old man. Appearance, deep wrinkles, seems to be hundreds of years old. Crazy, however, after a while, it will form a chrysalis. Just 10 years younger, no matter what injuries I had before, I will recover completely, but I am still crazy. Zhang Xiao is really well read and well remembered. Yi Wuji held the knife and walked to the side. I have seen that old man before, he is indeed a lunatic, but every time he pupates, he can become 10 years younger, which is really enviable. I wait for life, just like the dew in the morning. In a blink of an eye, however, he passed away like a boat sailing against the current, and his fortune was mysterious. As a result, just because he seemed to have the ability to rejuvenate his youth, those high-ranking officials flocked to him. The Empress Dowager will be merciful and happy. Master Yi, I heard that you hacked weird? Zhang Tao asked curiously, are they hard to kill? Hard to say. Yi Wuji seemed to think of something, and his face twitched. You also know, our Xinwu kingdom originally only had martial arts, and there were no weird magical powers, but hundreds of years ago, the world changed drastically, and our whole country soared and merged into the fairyland of Shushan. It is a lowly vehicle, and only cultivating immortals is the right way, but it is rumored that a peerless monster once appeared in the fairyland of Shushan Mountain, who actually broke the cycle of this world. Collectively referred to as weird. If you really encounter flesh and blood, there is nothing to say. With true energy and swords, you can always fight, but those real monsters and ghosts, I am afraid that a cultivator will have to take action. Although Xian Wukuo merged into the Shushan Wonderland, the Wonderland was too big and Xinwu Kingdom was too small, so there was not much communication. Even if there are some immortal cultivation techniques introduced, they are only at the top level. For young Zhang Tao, cultivators are still legends. Actually, I know, young master, that you have always wanted to learn martial arts from me, but the master has already considered it thoroughly. This time, you are willing to risk your reputation and present a pupa man, just to seek a fairy way for the young master. Speaking of this, even Yi Wuji couldn't help being envious. How can practicing martial arts compare to Yujian, cultivating immortals, and living a happy life? Actually, I once heard Master Tangxuan from Rishi Temple lecture. He said that Brahma sect has 108,000 small thousand worlds, 7,200 middle thousand worlds, and 36 great thousand worlds. My Xinwu kingdom was originally just a small thousand worlds. Thousands of worlds, Shushan Wonderland is the middle thousands of worlds, and it is because of the same origin that they can ascend and merge when the sky changes, and Taoism and martial arts have quite similarities, such as, Rishi Temple's dragon tiger vigorously King Kong is not bad supernatural power, as well as Qingyuan Palace's sword control. There are some rudimentary spells, and it may not be impossible to cultivate mana. Zhang Tao replied. Although this is also the truth, but groping for it by yourself is not as good as inheriting it. Yi Wuji sneered and said, Rishi Temple is also raising its own value. This sect has been declining since the White Tiger Immortal. I heard that before the unification of Xinwu Kingdom, the kingdoms fought in chaos, the martial arts heroes of the rivers and lakes ruled the world, the supreme martial arts of a generation, the White Tiger Immortal, was a hero through the ages, but unfortunately the wind was always blown away by the rain. No matter how heroic he was, his lifespan was exhausted, still grey. At this moment, the opportunity is in hand, how can we not seize it? Zhang Tao said, I have decided, I want to cultivate immortality. Well, young master, you made a wise decision. Everything the master does is for your own good. Yi Wuji nodded in satisfaction. This world is not peaceful, with frequent occurrences of weirdness. If one can control the sword and cultivate immortals, it may be possible to keep one side safe. At this moment, they saw that something was wrong with the chrysalis in the iron cage. A pair of white and delicate arms suddenly pierced the cocoon and tore it to the sides, and a boy who looked only 16 or 17 years old emerged. The pupa man. He broke out of the cocoon again. Zhang Tao was stunned. Didn't he mean the old man? How could he be a young man like Jade? He chrysalis 9 times, 90 years younger, that's about it. Although Yi Wuji was amazed, he was still able to hold his own. Don't be afraid, he is just an ordinary person, and he can't break through this iron cage. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Tao saw the young man stretch out his white and delicate palm without a trace of pores, grab the iron cage, and spread it to both sides. This cage, which is said to be made of refined steel, suddenly let out a scream of overwhelm, and a big hole was torn open. Have I been crazy for 90 years? Fang Xian looked at the sun in the sky and squinted his eyes. It was only a moment before he regained his senses, so he also listened to some of these people's conversations. He can understand this language. Then the keywords such as Rishi Temple, Beihuzianjun, and so on, attracted his attention even more. This is, the ancient martial arts world I have experienced. I am back. No. Am I breaking through the 7th level of alchemist? He pressed his forehead and felt a sharp pain in his head, as if he was going crazy again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 455. The breakthrough of De Luo's 7th level, is to take everything in oneself. I am in the state of breaking through the 7th level of De Luo. Probably, the AI at this time is transforming into thousands of people, wandering and exploring in the world I have experienced before. This seems to have another purpose. Fang Xian's eyes are piercing and bright, and he said, kill the madness. Nicola's crazy will is also divided into many parts, and I will devote myself to this, to kill him continuously, to kill madness, so that I can regain my sanity when I break through. It's not good, I'm not in good shape right now, not to mention my strength. The key is that I'm prone to going crazy, or I'll be going crazy most of the time. It seems that I was caught before, and I want to give it to an old woman as a precious beast to celebrate her birthday. So is the temple and Qingyuan palace eating shit? Actually let the secular dynasty stand on the head? Back then, when he dominated the martial arts world, most of the decent sects were forced to close their doors. It's not that Fang Xian doesn't want to kill them all, but that they can't be killed at all. Which righteous sect doesn't have a fire plan? How many true copies are lurking outside, in case of accidents? If you really want to fight hard, you will inevitably wash the world with blood. There will be continuous wars. Fang Xian didn't mind cutting grass and roots, but for an enemy he didn't care about at all, he dragged the world into chaos for hundreds of years. In fact, it means one thing: mutual scruples. After all, Fang Xian himself is not afraid, but there are always some relatives and friends who are afraid of assassination. The mountain gate is there, and the base camp can't escape. At least when the righteous way is at its peak, he dare not mess around, otherwise the monk can't escape the temple if he escapes. Facts have proved that during the period when he dominated the world, the righteous forces were indeed very well behaved, and in the end he wanted to take advantage of it, but was killed again. Probably it was that time when the vitality was seriously injured, and the talented elite masters who had accumulated so hard were wiped out, and then they did not fall, and finally they were ruled by the mortal court. What about the Golden Wind and Drizzle Tower? A large number of memories suddenly surfaced, making Fang Xian a little crazy. In his mind, madness is constantly eroding the defenses of reason. Don't be afraid, the pupa is a lunatic, go up and catch him. Yi Wuji yelled, holding an iron chain, and was about to step forward. Crazy. He. Fang Xian opened his mouth with a deep sneer, thinking that if he performed a set of White Tiger 7 kills evil skills at this time, would these people be scared to death on the spot. But let's forget it, this world seems to be merged into the Shushan world, I use the name Fang Xian in both worlds. If the Shushan sword sect is still there, I will definitely be suspicious. You can talk. Yi Wuji opened his mouth wide. Even so, the guards did not slow down their actions, chains flew up and circled towards Fang Xian. Fang Xian stretched out his hand to grab the iron chain, and took the iron chain into his hand. Originally, the pitch-black iron chain, which was as powerful as a poisonous snake and flood dragon, was as soft and cute as cotton thread in his hands. He continued to pull, and it seemed that he had the power of 9 bulls and 2 tigers. The other guards screamed, and they were pulled up one after another, and their figures fell into pieces. Fang Xian turned his gaze, landed on Zhang Tao, and walked over. What do you want to do? Yi Wuji let out a roar, drew his saber out of its sheath, and performed the wind-flying sand saber technique. He has had decades of attainments in this sword technique, and he is so proficient that he can be called a master in the world of martial arts. He differentiated with one knife, showing the light of 3 swords. A ray of saber light surrounded Zhang Tao, the young master, and the other 2 swept around, like yin and yang milling discs, with a fierce wind, rushing towards Fang Xian. It seems, you can't use too much power, otherwise the crazy speed will become faster. Feeling his own body, Fang Xian sighed silently in his heart, and pointed out. This is not fingering, but swordsmanship. A sword pierced into the light of the knife, and Yi Wuji immediately felt a terrible change. The opponent's finger seemed ordinary, but it happened to hit the flaw in his own saber technique. It had the mysterious power to turn decay into magic, and it directly pressed on the back of his saber. Not only that, Yi Wuji felt a strong force coming, and the precious sword in his hand flew out. As a swordsman, the knife in his hand is like his own arm. This is absolutely impossible, but it happened like this. For a moment, he was so heartbroken that he couldn't think of anything else. You, don't come here. Zhang Tao saw that the pupa man defeated Yi Wuji with one move and walked towards him, his face turned pale immediately. You, Fang Xian pointed at him, take off your clothes. What? Zhang Tao's face turned pale, and many terrifying thoughts suddenly emerged. Stupid. I'll help you. Fang Xian took a step forward, grabbed Zhang Tao, as if he was holding a little chicken, took off his coat, and put it on for himself, finally avoiding the embarrassment of walking a bird in the wind. Your Excellency, what kind of sword technique was that move just now? Yiwuji came back to his senses and asked blankly. I haven't decided on a name yet, why not call it Moth Turns into a Sword? Fang Xian smiled and said, the worm is humble and tortured by thousands of people. Once it pupates, breaks out of its cocoon and becomes a moth, soaring 9 days, it is for moth to sword. Good swordsmanship, good literary talent. At this time, another old voice was heard. The old man got down from the carriage, looked at this scene, and couldn't help saluting, Old man Zhang Yuhe, Your Excellency, is it really weird? If he hadn't seen the other party come out of the chrysalis with his own eyes, no one would have thought that the handsome young man in brocade clothes in front of him would have a weird head. The world is so big that there are so many wonders, how can manpower be exhausted? Fang Xian smiled slightly, neither admitting nor denying, Old man, are you going to send me to that old woman as a birthday gift? For some reason, after staring at this boy for a long time, Zhang Yuhe suddenly felt a little dizzy. Even, as long as you move your eyes away, you will forget the boy's face, as if staring at a word for a long time, you will forget the specific meaning and feel very strange. He suddenly smelled a sense of danger, and understood that there was indeed something most evil and most vicious hidden under this young man's appearance. This old man, I did have this kind of thought before, but if I knew that my lord has a mind, I would definitely not be so direct, but would seek it in a roundabout way. Zhang Yuhe answered solemnly. You're quite honest, in this world, through the ages, how many heroes and kings don't want to live forever? Fang Xian laughed. That old woman, the Empress Dowager, probably has no aptitude for cultivating immortals, so she can only seek it from crooked ways. However, the other party seems to hold the power of Xi and Wukuo, so he can take advantage of it. He thought for a while and said, I have a set of moth transformation mentality here, ordinary people can practice immortality without the aptitude of cultivating immortals, after all, which insect boar is not extremely ugly and humble before it pupates? The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 456. Your Excellency really has the method of longevity? Zhang Yuhe breathed heavily. Eternal life is difficult, but immortality is easy, especially for you and other worms. Fang Xian showed a strange smile. Although the opponent caught him as a birthday gift, it could also be regarded as a disguised form of protection. He didn't mind giving some chances. After all, the moth transformation and moth transformation sword technique created at will have long been polluted by the power of evil gods, mixed with madness and indescribable power, and are not good things. Besides, I'm already half crazy, the idea of a lunatic is just so arbitrary. Fang Xian laughed and recited a mantra-like mentality, the worm is humble and tortured by thousands of people. Once it turns into a chrysalis, it breaks out of its cocoon and becomes a moth, soaring to the 9 heavens. These originally ordinary words, after his chanting, have power. The eyes of Zhang Yuhe, Zhang Tao, Yiwuji, and the others became blurred, and they felt that their minds were stuffed into a ball of paste, and they carried some inexplicable knowledge. The surrounding forest was silent, and in the darkness, shadows surged, as if something terrifying was attracted to it. The first thing that appeared was a deep flame. Behind the flames, there were more than a dozen pale palms flying in mid-air. Accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps, a huge monster that seemed to be spliced together from more than a dozen human and beast limbs came out of the woods. It's a weird ghost fire. Flying palms. And the mountain of 10 corpses. Yiwuji was the first to come back to his senses and screamed. Phantom fire is unpredictable and can burn people's souls. It is very terrifying, and it is also the most weird type that ordinary warriors do not want to encounter. Flying palms are flying human hands. They are not only powerful, but also have amazing speed. More importantly, they can remove the palms of victims, making the group grow bigger. The last mountain of corpses is a monster that Yiwuji hacked to death. It is composed of countless broken limbs. It is most likely to appear in places with many dead bodies, such as cemeteries and battlefields. At this time, the mountain of 10 corpses. It means that there are not many corpses that make up it, and even ordinary people may be hacked to death with a knife or burned to death with fire. But if it is allowed to accumulate continuously and become a mountain of hundreds of corpses, it will have to be done by experts in the rivers and lakes. Once it is further promoted and becomes the 1,000 corpse mountain and 10,000 corpse mountain, it will be absolutely devastated, and the city will be wiped out, and non-immortal practitioners will not be able to match it. These 3 heads are all weird, and ordinary pedestrians can't avoid them, but they didn't expect to be attracted together. It's a good time. If you want to cultivate the sword of moth change, how can you lose blood? Fang Xian came to a guard. Shi Shiren took the long sword, pulled a sword flower, and stabbed at Fei's palm. Yi Wuji's eyes widened. He can't imagine that there are such sword skills in the world. Ordinary warriors would struggle with a flying palm for a long time and be careful. And Fang Xian just stabbed at random, piercing flying palms like a string of gourds. As a monster, the vitality of the flying palm is quite tenacious, and it can recover quickly after being cut. Only true energy and mana can restrain it. But at this moment, the flying palms that were strung together seemed to be dead and stopped moving. Not only that, the originally pale but thick palm suddenly became withered, as if it had lost a lot of vitality. As for the long sword in Fang Xian's hand, on the blade, there are lines like blood veins, which are slowly wriggling. The power of worms and hogs is weak. You have to gather sand to form a tower, gather armpits to form a fur, in order to accumulate enough power to pupate. Simply put, it is to kill. Fang Xian sighed quietly. So the sword of moth transformation is also a sword of killing life. The sword takes life and is for my use. This sword of moth transformation has 3 forms. The first form turns into insects, the second style turns into pupa, and the third style turns into moths. At this moment, the cloud of ghost fire suddenly rushed over, wrapped Fang Xian, as if it wanted to burn him into a ball of ashes. Fang Xian took his time and swung his long sword in a circle, immediately blocking all the flames. The move of transforming insects, the sword energy becomes silk, penetrates into the limbs and bones of the victim, and absorbs vitality. The trick of pupation is defense, like a giant chrysalis, impenetrable by wind and rain. The last sword, moth. Fang Xian laughed loudly, and suddenly swung out another sword light. This sword is radiant, vast, and infinite, completely different from the previous sinister and tricky swordsmanship, like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon, wonderful and extraordinary. Puff! The sword light directly extinguished the ghost fire, and then pierced straight into the mountain of 10 corpses, cutting a huge gap, and blood flowed profusely. In the next moment, the originally huge sword light suddenly turned into countless sword threads, piercing into the mountain of meat, like maggots attached to bones. The huge mountain of meat withered quickly, fell down suddenly, and rotted quickly. I'll go too, haha. Fang Xian sheathed his sword, turned around and left. No way. Even if he only used a little strength, he still felt that the frightening madness had eroded to the limit. Maybe in the next moment, he will become crazy again. For him who devoured Nicola and only achieved level 7, madness was the mainstream. Reason is just an occasional flash of inspiration in a long life. In the dense forest, with the tap of Fang Xian's toes, the vitality he absorbed was transformed into true energy, and he traveled several feet away at an unbelievably fast speed. Nikolai is far from gone, he is in my heart, in my mind, in my true spirit. Madness is inevitable. I can feel, there is still a part of madness spilling out. Maybe it will become the weirdness of this world. Finding him and killing him is my mission in this world. Besides, how about those old friends? Why don't you go and see, Shu-san? Those sword fairies are probably going to hate me. Fortunately, this time it fell in Xinwu Kingdom, and there are not many immortal cultivators. Although I can deal with them, I may have to use too much power. It is not a good thing for me or for this world. Suddenly, all the reason in Fang Xian's eyes disappeared. He fell headlong, fell into the rotten mud, and began to eat the soil. Fang Xian's expression was crazy, as if the rancid soil was incomparably delicious, and he devoured it in big mouthfuls. He's crazy. However, Fang Xian's main consciousness has long been used to it, and it is regarded as a deep sleep. He had been asleep for so long before, and it was not too late. Well, the time of falling into madness this time must be much shorter than before, but even if you regain your sanity, there may still be madness. Even so, he is still very confident in completing the task. After all, he can sense the existence of Nicola and has a general direction. In addition, the other party is crazier than him. He can occasionally regain his sanity, but Nicola is a complete lunatic. Even if a trace of madness leaks out, the avatar formed is also full of madness. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 457. The worm is humble and tortured by thousands of people. Once it turns into a chrysalis, it breaks out of its cocoon and becomes a moth, soaring 9 days. A raving, constantly turned into a crazy cry, lingering in Zhang Tao's ears. What? Drenched in cold sweat, he woke up from the bed like a nightmare. A few days have passed since that day, but everything that happened is still vivid in my mind. In particular, the mental method of the moth's transformation, like a maggot attached to the bone, kept echoing in his ears. Yuji once said, obvious exercises, 80% are evil exercises, you must be cautious in personal cultivation. Both Zhang Tao and Zhang Yuhe felt that the old man's words were right, and even if the formula really had the miraculous effect of restoring youth, they had to find someone to try it first before giving it to their masters. Which high-ranking family does not have a dedicated drug tester? But, I can't forget it. Zhang Tao held his head, and the formulas, one by one, were like mantras, constantly echoing in his ears. This is really evil. He looked out the window, it was still night. Zhang Tao sighed. Ever since he was entangled by this spell, he found that he had changed a little. For example, during the day, my spirits are low and I want to sleep, but at night I feel energized, unable to sleep no matter what, and have become a nocturnal habit. Another example, I lost my appetite for exquisite food. Torture. Zhang Tao felt extremely painful torture, but no one could tell, he didn't want to be regarded as a lunatic. In the darkness, his eyes were shining brightly. Suddenly, he saw the light outside, and suddenly felt a little longing. The reason why moths fly into flames is because they have phototaxis. Zhang Tao's throat rolled. Unable to bear it, he opened the door and walked out of the room. As the son of the Yashi doctor's family, he has excellent accommodation conditions, and there is a small garden when he opens the door. Under the moonlight, the garden is lush and full of vitality. Looking at this scene, Zhang Tao couldn't help swallowing. He is hungry. A desire that originated from the stomach and the heart suddenly hit his heart and tore through his defenses. Those green plants, in Zhang Tao's eyes, are more fragrant than any delicacies. Finally, Zhang Tao couldn't bear it anymore, stepped forward, tore off a rose leaf, and stuffed it into his mouth. The juices of plants actually don't taste very good, but his mouth and sense of taste seem to have undergone a certain transformation. When he eats them, it's like a hungry person eating barbecue. The taste buds feel extremely fresh, and the teeth chew unconsciously. Throat swallowed greedily. Zhang Tao moved faster and faster, pulling out the peony plant and snapping it off, sucking the juice greedily with her small mouth. In this behavior, his hunger was satisfied, and his eyes gradually recovered. However, 2 lines of tears flowed down directly. I turned into a monster? Will I become a weird, chrysalis moth? Moths to the flame. After raging the small flower bed, Zhang Tao's hunger subsided a lot, and the humanity in his heart returned. Insects and hogs are humble, thousands of torments. He muttered the mantra of moth transformation, and suddenly understood the deep meaning. It is precisely because human beings are like worms and hogs that they have to do everything possible to obtain nutrients, even if they are covered with bruises, even if they are tortured. After Zhang Tao realized this, he immediately felt a heat flow in his body. This doesn't look like true energy, nor is it the rumored mana, but a kind of extraordinary power, which comes from a weird power. The moth's mind-changing method, he didn't need to practice, he just got started. But at this time, he didn't feel the slightest joy, only extremely fearful, evil kung fu. No. Even evil kung fu can't be described. Could it be that, the devil's way of kung fu that has been handed down from the fairyland of Mount Chu? The moth-changing method does not require long-term practice, it only needs continuous savings. Even, it cannot be abolished. Every time you get injured or lose your work, it is a catalyst for the progress of the practice. Once you get started, it is a maggot attached to the bone and cannot be changed. Zhang Tao was in a heavy heart. At this time, he was a beginner in martial arts, his hearing and eyesight were far better than before. Suddenly his right ear moved, and he heard a rustling sound. The boy subconsciously walked to the side yard, and saw black shadows wriggling in the flower garden. Get closer, and under the moonlight, you can see a person lying on the ground, constantly gnawing on the lawn. He was so selfless that he didn't notice Zhang Tao approaching at all. After a moment, he raised his head, revealing the verdant plant sap on his chin, and his blank eyes. "Master Yi?" Zhang Tao screamed out. "Young master?" Yi Wuji's expression seemed to be crying or laughing. The moth-changing mind technique, I have learned it without a teacher, it really is an incomparably miraculous technique, and the moth-changing sword is even more ingenious and ingenious. His words are too pale, only by true cultivation can one appreciate the charm of life. Fortunately, I thought that your master was upright and strict, and how determined you were, but I didn't expect it to be so. The boy rolled his eyes in his heart, but the expression on his face softened. Me too. Anyway, it's just eating grass, it can only be regarded as a special hobby, and it's not a big deal. Hee hee. Yi Wuji laughed dryly and got up. Zhang Tao was about to say something just now, looking at the disc-like moon, his expression suddenly changed. Wait a minute, we are all like this, where is the old man? Yi Wuji's expression also changed. Let's go and have a look, just don't disturb other people. He came to the wall and flipped over easily. Just as he was about to give Zhang Tao a hand, he saw the young master kicking his legs. He was like a flying insect, and he also jumped over the wall. He couldn't help but secretly admired, it's just a few days. With this kind of skill, it's amazing. The two came to Zhang Yuhi's room using lightness kung fu one after the other. With superhuman hearing, they heard the sound of chewing. Yi Wuji couldn't help but admire in his heart, the old man is the old man, his concentration is amazing, I couldn't bear it anymore, I went directly to the garden to graze, but the old man could bring it into the room to enjoy. As expected of a scholar, everyone has a demeanor, and he is worthy of starvation. Satisfied. Grandpa, grandson asks to see you. Zhang Tao knocked on the door and said softly. Tao, what are you doing here? As soon as the voices in the room stopped, Zhang Yuhi's voice sounded with panic. After that day, my grandson felt something was wrong, thinking of grandpa, I came here to say hello. Zhang Tao replied sternly, something is wrong, maybe it's just normal, don't worry too much. Ah, Zhang Yuhi panicked even more, you know? Snapped. In the room, something seemed to have fallen to the ground. Yi Wuji felt that something was wrong, so he burst into internal energy and pushed the door open. Zhang Tao followed into the room. Even though the surroundings were dim, he could see clearly, and covered his mouth with his hand. In the hazy moonlight, Zhang Yuhi raised his head ferociously, his chin was covered with blood. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 458. This is, raw meat. Yi Wuji glanced at it, as if it was a rib stolen from the kitchen. He couldn't help asking. Ugh. Zhang Yuhi let out a long sigh, and covered his face with his sleeves. It's embarrassing to be old. After some chicken and dog jumping, the three sat down and began to talk openly. Zhang Yuhi said, I do have such delusional thoughts about longevity, but I will never practice the method of unknown origin. This moth is really strange, and it often surrounds the old man's ears, making the old man lie down day and night. I am fond of the essence of plants and trees, and I have recently become obsessed with raw food. Zhang Tao felt a chill in his heart. Grandpa's symptoms were obviously more severe than his. And doesn't this mean that he will do the same in the future? It's the same in a certain family. After hearing this, Yi Wuji's eyes lit up, and he touched his chin. I don't like cooked food recently. Could it be that after cooking, some vitality in the food will dissipate? Probably that's the reason. Zhang Yuhi smiled bitterly, but the method of the pupa man is really effective. The old man has been full of energy these few days and nights, and he seems to be a few years younger. The sword of transforming insects absorbs vitality. It turns out that the moth transformation sword technique is also a way to practice moth transformation. Yi Wuji seemed to realize something. This method is evil, and it probably needs vitality, a lot of vitality. The three looked at each other. In the end, Zhang Yuhi let out a long sigh. Besides, there are some mysterious changes, you see. He unbuttoned his clothes and let Zhang Tao and Yi Wuji look at his back. There, a clump of brightly colored fluff grew out at some unknown time, and it seemed to be carrying some powder. Not only that, these fluffs come together and seem to grow into weird eye patterns. Zhang Tao's voice was full of tears. I will be like this in the future? Become a monster. This seems to be very similar to the patterns on the wings of moths. Yi Wuji's forehead was also covered with cold sweat. Could it be that I wait for the future? Will become a mothman? At this time, in his ears, the lingering mantra of the mind suddenly became more serious. Once it pupates, it breaks out of its cocoon and becomes a moth. Once it pupates, it breaks out of its cocoon and becomes a moth. He immediately thought of the chrysalis, and thought of the giant brown chrysalis, and couldn't help laughing. It turns out, only by abandoning the human body and turning into a monster can we gain longevity. The old man has already thought, the three of us, I'm afraid we will become monsters in the future, and everyone will call and beat us. Zhang Yuhi also smiled wryly. Grandpa, then what should we do? Zhang Tao said in panic. After all, he was still a child and hadn't had much experience in the world. When he encountered such a big event, he immediately lost his footing. In my opinion, I still have to offer a birthday gift, and I will offer this longevity method. Zhang Yuhi said solemnly, with a look of ruthlessness in his expression. What? Zhang Tao and Yi Wuji were stunned. That's not the case. Are we going to hide in the mountains and forests for the rest of our lives? Zhang Yuhi sneered and said, Xinhua country is small and poor, and the real masters of cultivating immortals don't look down on them at all. Even within the capital, there are very few cultivators. Ordinary people come and go. This old man knows, the Queen Mother is suffering from the law of immortality for mortals. She is about to die of old age. How can she not be moved? At that time, if she is dragged into the water and given shelter, then I can still enjoy the glory and wealth in the future. Zhang Tao never imagined that the old man had such ambitions. but, if you make a wrong step, you will be lost forever. Yuji still hesitated. Hehe, so we still need to use force to protect ourselves, don't we already have magical skills? Zhang Yuhi beckoned, and a sword hanging on the wall roared and flew directly into his palm. The old man has only learned a few sets of health-building swords before, but now he can barely practice the first form of moth-turning sword. Grandmaster, he can still be killed, if he waits until the future to become more skilled, even a cultivator can be killed. Okay, wealth and wealth are in danger, done. As soon as Yuji gritted his teeth, he also had the passion and yearning for the set of martial arts in his heart. After all, they are martial arts practitioners, and when they see a set of truly miraculous skills, it is rare for them not to fall into it. Fang Xian opened his eyes and woke up. When he was crazy, he didn't know what he did. At this time, the original brocade clothes were already in tatters and turned into beggar clothes. When I went crazy, what did I do? I don't know at all, it's not okay. This feeling of being out of control made Fang Xian a little uncomfortable. Of course, it's just not getting used to it, and I'm not afraid of any danger. Although his body is only a part of his spirit, the power he carries can also ensure that he has the capital to run rampant in this world. Just don't mess with Shu Mountain, otherwise, if you recognize me as Fang Xian, and the ferry descends directly to the mortal world, it won't be much fun. Although Fang Xian had a smile on his face, his eyes were extremely dangerous, making one feel like seeing a beast that was about to hunt. Although he came to his senses, the madness in his heart did not diminish at all. He's still half crazy. At this moment, he felt 3 faint inductions in a distant place. Hehe, the idiot who covets my power, in this world, there will be another kind of family from now on, or a brand new weirdness, the Mothman. Fang Xian looked around and found that he was still in the dense forest, holding a deer's hind leg in his hand. Well, it seems that I'm crazy, but some instincts are still there. If someone thinks I'm crazy, it's easy to deal with, and it's likely to suffer a big loss. He threw away the uncooked deer leg, and his mind merged with everything, and he felt another will that seemed to have the same origin but was insanely crazy. The direction is found. Fang Xian nodded, performed lightness kung fu, and started on his way. It won't work like this, maybe I should change the state of madness and rationality, let my sanity last a little longer. Specifically, madness and rationality are fixed, but the ratio of doping can be different. For example, Fang Xian is now in a half-crazy state, that is, he has maintained 50% of his sanity, and he can last for about half a day. And if you voluntarily give up some rationality and become 30% rational and 70% crazy, the persistence time will be longer. Of course, the behavior of the characters will become more chaotic, but it is barely acceptable. This is not to say that it can be done. If it can be done, it needs the participation of Ji Li, maybe it can be sorted out in alchemy. Who would create such a strange alchemy? Besides me, probably no one else needs it, right? While thinking, Fang Xian tapped his toes on a treetop, jumped out of the jungle, and saw the road and people. At this moment, he felt an impulse in his heart. He didn't want to hurry, he wanted to go to the stream to catch fish. Snapped. In mid-air, the figure turned around and fell into the river. After all, he is half crazy. If he is 70% crazy, it will be more serious, right? No, I just want to fish. The Lord of Reincarnation, author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 459. Raxhahai, the seashore. This sea is located to the east of Xinwu Kingdom. It is said that there used to be a large expanse of land, but in the sky change, the sky overturned and the land sank, turning into an ocean. Susan took a deep breath of the fishy and salty air, with a nostalgic look on his face. He was born in this small fishing village by the sea, and he went out to wander around in his childhood. The fishing village was poor and couldn't support too many boys, so there was no way around it. Most of the other friends who fled famine died in other places, and it is lucky to survive one or two. But Susan is different. Ever since he was separated from his little friends, he has met a strange fate. He discovered the martial arts secrets left by his predecessors in the barren mountains and ridges. Sankixia. Now that Su Sangong has become famous, he wants to go home for a visit. In order to show that he did not forget his roots, he did not choose to change his name. The unnamed small fishing village is still the same as before, dilapidated and dilapidated. Occasionally, wild dogs will come out by the side of the road and compete with children for food. Seeing this scene, Susan's eyes turned red, and he turned his back quickly, almost crying. Back then, if I hadn't fled because of the famine, wouldn't I have been one of them? He walked into a dilapidated house and shouted, "Father, Mother, I'm back." "You are, Zyasin." An old fisherman was drying his nets in the fence. When he saw Susan, he called out in doubt, "It's me, mother, second brother, third brother, and younger sister?" Susan asked strangely. "Little 2 and 13 got a plague and have already gone," the old fisherman replied with no ups and downs in his voice. "I hired a doctor with the money you sent, but I still can't pass the threshold. This is fate. As for your mother and Yao's sister, we are all heading to the sea now." Susan was a little strange. Fishermen take advantage of the ebb tide. Going to the beach to pick up some seafood such as shells and small fish is called catching the sea, but the time is wrong now. Don't underestimate them. The women in the village can be patient. The old fisherman smiled, with a strange smile on his face. "It's all blessed by the dragon head god." Susan didn't take it to heart. Although the village used to worship the Dragon King, isn't the Dragon Head God and the Dragon King the same thing? He settled down with peace of mind, and sure enough, he saw his mother and sister during dinner. Seeing that the woman at home was living a good life and looked good, he was relieved. Midnight. Susan, who was lying down, suddenly opened his eyes. He heard footsteps. As a martial artist, especially in the life of licking blood at the edge of the rivers and lakes, he is very vigilant and sleeps very lightly. At this time, as soon as he stretched out his hand, he grabbed the dagger under the pillow. There are 3 people, what are parents and sister doing? It doesn't seem to be a solution. Susan couldn't help being even more curious when he heard the sound of the door opening. He thought for a while, and finally couldn't bear it anymore, and followed. This time, he followed outside the small village. On a sandy beach, a torch was suddenly lit, and many people gathered. Su Santang was in the dark, feeling a little strange. Now the village discusses things in the middle of the night. He yawned, and just as he was about to go back, he saw this group of people singing and dancing strangely around the fire. "Dragon Head God, Dragon Head God. Your reputation will never be forgotten. Your believers, offer sacrifices and swear that your name will be found." A large number of figures twisted their limbs, their voices were high-pitched, and their expressions were frenzied. The faster the beating of the instrument, the twisting of the human body exudes an inexplicable frenzied breath, reminiscent of wriggling insects, almost nauseating. Susan pinched his thigh, feeling as if he was in a blurred dream. No matter how dull he was at this moment, he knew that the village had become abnormal. The dark sea also became more turbulent at this time. Suddenly, a group of people came out of the sea. They are not real people, but have pitch-black scales, just like the legendary merman. Susan saw that his parents stepped forward and hugged the 2 young mermaids affectionately. "They are my brothers. My brother didn't die, turned into a monster? No. It's a supersized freak." Susan's heart gradually sank. Crash. At this moment, he saw a vortex emerging from the sea. Accompanied by a low growl that almost made him vomit blood, a huge black figure emerged, with a snake-like head protruding to the shore. "That is Du Kinkin was boating on the river, and suddenly saw a strange person. That strange person's lightness kung fu was astonishingly amazing. He swept over 10 feet, almost as if he was flying with power. Just as he was about to say hello, he saw the strange man make an extremely indecent turn, and plunged headfirst into the river. His expression was stunned. Such a peerless lightness skill, and can turn in mid-air, it is simply a peerless master. I am far inferior to it, but why is it so blunt? Could it be that something went wrong when the senior was exercising his chi? Just as Du Kinkin was about to go up to the rescue, he saw a white streak in a wave, breaking through the river suddenly, holding a fish in his hand. It turns out that senior wants to eat fish. It's quite childlike. As soon as he thought of this, he saw that strange man stopped on the shore, stretched out his right hand, and kept stroking the body of the fish. Du Kinkin abandoned the boat and went ashore. After observing for a while, he finally confirmed that the senior, a peerless master, was a little out of order. No matter how much an expert in playing games, he wouldn't spend half a day like this, would he? Just when his legs were numb and he was about to leave, Fang Xian also ended his desire to fish, saw him, and said, "Have you been watching for a long time?" "Shannon Du Kinkin, have you met, senior?" Du Kinkin was a little confused about the way of the person opposite. The person had black beard and hair, and his voice seemed very young. But there are many old monsters with deep internal skills and good looks in the world, so he dare not lose his courtesy. If Fang Xian was from the martial arts world, he must have heard of the title of Three Wonders, but at this time, he didn't know anything about it. Fang Xian thought for a while, and asked, "I haven't been in Jianghu for a long time, I don't know much about many things. In the martial arts world now, is there still the name of Golden Wind and Drizzle Tower?" As soon as he said this, he couldn't help but see two figures in front of his eyes. One dragon and one tiger, they are all quite outstanding for a while. "Senior, you really have some brain problems, probably you can't remember some things." Du Kinkin thought of this, and replied, "Senior said, it was the Golden Wind and Drizzle Tower that came out of the White Tiger Immortal? This building, Rishi Temple, and Qingyuan Palace were once known as the three major martial arts holy places in the world, but later it was the same. Declining, and now retreating to Yueshan County. I heard that the situation is not good. Could it be that senior was born in this building?" The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 460. A carriage is slowly advancing on the official road. Du Kinkin held the whip and did the work of the coachman, but he enjoyed it so much. After all, he was sure that the person sitting in the carriage was a big shot. Even if it is just some pointers on martial arts, he has benefited a lot. Now this senior wants to go to Donghai for a trip. How can he not do his best? Although, this senior would go crazy from time to time, but fortunately, it was still tolerable. Inside the compartment, Fang Xian opened his eyes, and the original madness receded a bit. He came to his senses again. Very good, during my madness, I can't act, but I can be led to act. Although I can control the other party with poison and other means, how can that be compared to other people's sincere service? After observing some time ago, he confirmed that Du Kinkin was the kind of righteous person. Moreover, there is still a little stupidity, especially the kind that pays attention to promises. Of course, the other party is not a fool. He must have gone through the famous people in the magic way in his heart, and confirmed that Fang Xian is not that kind of person, so he chose to help. It's a pity that Du Kinkin didn't know that Fang Xian Zendao was just pretending. He is a generation of White Tiger Demon Lord. Yueshan County, it happens to be on the way to Donghai, why not take a look? Fang Xian secretly calculated that he was running out of time. To be honest, I have no feelings for the offspring of these acquaintances. It's okay to drop by and meet them, but it's impossible to make a special trip for them. Suddenly, an illusion appeared in front of Fang Xian. Well, for a lunatic, split personality or phantom memories are quite normal. But this time was markedly different. He saw the fire, the sea, the fishing village. There is even a group of aliens who are very similar to the scales. They are calling, jumping, and seem to be performing some kind of ritual. A bloody human pillar was pushed into the sea. From the depths of the sea, I poked out my head, which was one huge snake head after another, with eyes the size of a tea bowl, and the tails were twisted together, forming a smooth ball of meat. On top of the meat mass, there are some terrifying lumps, some of them are scales, some of them are like sarcoma, full of pollution and chaos and madness. The huge mass of flesh with 8 snake heads was hidden in the indescribably deep darkness, and there seemed to be invisible tentacles extending into the distance around it, bringing a creepy aura. It devours the sacrifice, it yearns wildly, recalling its own name. No. That's me. However, if it really finds its own name, I am afraid that I will always face schizophrenia within the only time I have to be rational. Fang Xian pressed the center of his eyebrows, and suddenly sneered, I found you, it really is in the East China Sea. After all, it is the same source of madness as him, and it is quite normal to feel some pictures occasionally. At this moment, he suddenly felt something again. That is another place, it seems to be inside a certain palace. He saw Zhang Yuhe who had become a lot younger, and saw a woman who was wearing a fancy dress but was already very old. The other party stared at Zhang Yuhe, the greed in his eyes was barely concealed. The moths have laid their eggs, the next season will be a bountiful one. Fang Xian muttered and said something. Outside of the carriage, Du Qinqin had long been familiar with it. No need to be surprised that a half-crazed Grand Master occasionally bursts out with some weird words, right? The carriage slowly drove into Yueshanjun County City. Senior, the front is the main building of the Golden Wind and Rain Building. Du Qinqin opened the curtain and said softly. At the same time, looking at the peaceful tall wooden building, he felt very regretful. In the storyteller's mouth and in the storybook, shouldn't some villains just happen to appear on the stage at this time, allowing the seniors to show their supernatural power? However, this childish thought only flashed in his mind, and was forgotten by Du Qinqin, and he even felt a little funny. The real rivers and lakes and the rivers and lakes in the script are obviously two different things. Xiao Du, let's part here. Fang Xian smiled, and handed over a volume of books. Here is a book of martial arts, which I wrote casually when I was free, and I will treat it as a reward for your hard work during these days. This, Du Qinqin was a little embarrassed, but after turning to the first page, he couldn't take his eyes off, the method of using martial arts to enter the Tao. He opened his mouth wide, like a toad struck by lightning. Is this a Taoist book? Originally, Xi and Wu Kingdom respected martial arts, but after it was merged into the Shushan Wonderland, everyone knew that martial artists were nothing but vulgar. The ones who are really high above are the immortals who live forever and see forever. And if you want to become a fairy, you must have a Taoist book. Not even Ruo Temple and Qingyuan Palace. A true Taoist book must at least be able to cultivate mana, which can make ordinary people truly become a cultivator. It's a pity that no matter how hard the warrior tries, there seems to be a natural moat between the innate chi and mana. Du Qinqin's hands trembled, as if he was holding a bridge made of gold. If this was true, and the news leaked out, he felt that the current peaceful rivers and lakes would immediately cause a bloodbath. It's just the first step. It's just a little trick to condense the true energy of martial arts into mana. It's nothing. I hope you can carry it forward, and then find out the martial arts talisman and condense the martial arts supernatural powers. Find a way to. Fang Xian's voice is still there, but his figure has disappeared. God, Goddess. Du Qinqin was stunned. He was speechless, so he knelt down suddenly and slammed his head 3 times towards the carriage. Golden Wind and Drizzle Tower, Patriarch Hall. Although it was his first time here, Fang Xian felt somewhat familiar with the regulations. Maybe it's because these descendants are more inclined to the layout of the main building during construction? In short, Fang Xian successfully found the place where the ancestors of the past generations were enshrined in the Golden Wind Drizzle Tower, and opened the old wooden door stepping on the broken sunlight. As a theoretically important place, in fact the defense of the Patriarch Hall is far inferior to the warehouse and the place where the secret books are stored. At this time, Fang Xian pushed the door open as if no one was around, and no one jumped out to stop him. He looked at the densely packed spiritual seats, most of which he didn't recognize, and went directly to the second floor. Among the important tablets enshrined here, I finally found a few names that I am familiar with: Yulong Jiao, Yuxiao Hu, and, of course, his own. Seeing my tablet, I really don't know what expression I should have. Ancestor worship, inheritance. Fang Xian looked at the scene and fell into deep thought. He may be able to make a move to help the Golden Wind and Drizzle Tower to shake the world again, but with the scouring of time and years, what will be left? Perhaps it is a better choice to pass on the inheritance and keep the bloodline forever. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 461. In the ancient ancestral hall. The light and shadow shattered, causing Fang Xian's thoughts to diverge suddenly. The madness in his mind began to play out, and at the same time, his strength was also surging. An inexplicable feeling made him know that what he wanted to do would definitely succeed. Once upon a time, it was extremely difficult to create an alchemy. But at this time, the realm has reached, and the power has been obtained. All I have to do is to prescribe the effect of this alchemy. Blessing. I bless this place, bless this place. All those who sincerely worship the ancestors of this place will increase the proportion of geniuses among their descendants in the future. It's a horrible effect. Fang Xian fixed the activity of worship as a special ceremony, and the blessing of blood was the result and gift of the ceremony. As for the effectiveness of maintenance, it may be calculated in tens of thousands of years, and may even be permanent. To change permanently, this is the 7th level of terror. Ha ha, no matter who these people are, as long as they sincerely pray, they will all benefit. Fang Xian laughed loudly. Suddenly, the laughter was a little uncontrollable. After all, it is unrealistic to expect a half-mad person to control himself all the time. At this time, he felt an impulse in his heart, and his hands and feet danced unconsciously. If the previous movement did not attract anyone, then it is now blatantly saying that there are thieves here. Tread. Accompanied by the sound of footsteps, an old man who seemed to be a guard yawned and went up the stairs, suddenly startled, his fingers and beard trembling with anger. You. Fang Xian's actions at this time, in his opinion, are simply dancing in the ancestral hall with the same mocking effect as the disco dancing in front of the grave. Brave maniac, stop now. The old man let out a loud shout, and stretched out both palms with such force as a rainbow. Although he is not a grand master, he is also a congenital master. He is quite famous in Jianghu with his palm of breaking mountains and rocks. Even if he is a grand master or even a weird monster, he would dare to touch it with this pair of iron palms. But at this moment, he clapped his palms on Fang Xian's body, feeling that the surging true power was like a mud cow entering the sea, and disappeared in an instant. Not only that, Fang Xian's right hand was only unconsciously moved, and the old man felt a surge of unstoppable force. He flew up unconsciously, smashed through the roof, and fell straight down. He didn't know how many bones were broken. This is at least the great master. You are a grand master, dressed as a beggar, and went to dance in other people's ancestral halls. Are you crazy? The old man was so sad and angry that he spurted out a mouthful of blood. Elder Ni. This movement immediately attracted more people's attention. A large number of well-dressed warriors emerged from all directions, surrounding the Patriarch Hall. It's just that he is afraid of the enemy who can seriously injure the innate master Elder Ni, and he is also afraid of destroying those Patriarch tablets, so he can only besiege instead of attacking. The landlord is here. Not long after, several congenital elders surrounded a young girl and came outside the Patriarch Hall. Looking at this scene, their expressions were gloomy. Why are their enemies coming to my Patriarch Hall? The girl was very puzzled. If it is the enemy of the Golden Wind and Rain building, then no matter attacking her personally or the warehouse, it will be more effective than the commemorative Patriarch Hall. The owner. Elder Ni's chest was covered with blood, and he stepped forward to tell the story. What? Before the hostess did anything, those innate elders exploded with anger. You are so brave, you dare to dance in our ancestral hall. Blasphemy ancestors. Bold lunatic, daring. Originally, they thought it might be a senior who had something to do with the Golden Wind and Rain building, but they had a misunderstanding for a while. But after hearing that someone dressed up as a beggar and dared to dance in the Patriarch Hall, they were convinced that this was an enemy, and an enemy with an extremely bad personality. Landlord, give an order, fight with him. Humph, it must be those former decent people. Although we listened to Xi and Wukyo's order and both sides stopped fighting, they obviously won't let it go, and even came up with this method to disgust us. The girl frowned her pretty eyebrows, and said suddenly, quiet. She seemed to have a lot of authority here, and everyone fell silent. You wait here, I will go in and meet that person. The girl waved her hand and walked straight into the ancestral hall. The girl's name is Uzilo. She can become the owner of the Golden Wind and Rain Tower because of her blood, and because of her talent. Although Uzilo is only 18 years old, he is already a master. Although, after Xi and Wu Kingdom merged into Shushan Wonderland as a whole, it is said that due to the change in vitality, martial arts training is far easier than before, but it is also a very remarkable achievement. And she is the only Grand Master of Jinfengdriya building, holding the authority, and no one dares to refute her words. Uzilo took a deep breath and walked into the first floor. She swept her eyes and saw that the numerous tablets and altars, as well as the incense candles and offerings on them, were not damaged, and she couldn't help but feel a little relieved. This is not like the performance of someone who came to seek revenge. But here, she did hear voices from the second floor, as if someone was jumping around, with a chaotic rhythm. Is there really someone dancing in the ancestral hall? Her forehead was wrinkled into a beautiful Chuan character, and she stepped up the steps. Boom. Tread. Above the wooden attic, the sound of footsteps never stopped. They are sometimes dense, sometimes soothing, like a messy drum beat. But after listening too much, Uzilo felt that there seemed to be some kind of rhythm hidden in the chaotic footsteps. Boom. She couldn't help but stop and listened for a while. At some point, she felt that her heartbeat was suddenly in tune with the footsteps upstairs, as if she was actively beating a certain time. Uzilo was instantly frightened. After all, she is a grandmaster. What kind of strength is needed to plot against her like this? She has never heard of this kind of magical sonic martial arts. No, this is not martial arts, but spells. My Golden Wind and Rain building, when did I offend a cultivator? Uzilo's heart immediately sank. Facts have proved that if a martial artist offends a cultivator, it must be a catastrophe. Even just listening to the footsteps, she has already suffered a little internal injury, and it feels like the blood in her whole body is going to flow backwards. Just when Uzilo was about to fail, the footsteps stopped. She breathed a sigh of relief, although she wanted to run away, but with a struggling look on her face, she went up to the second floor and bowed directly. The owner of the Golden Wind and Drizzle Tower, Uxialo, has seen seniors, if I waited before if there is something offensive, please seniors have a lot. After finishing speaking, Uzilo did not dare to look up, anxiously waiting for the judgment of fate. The Lord of Reincarnation. Author, Wen Xiaogong. Chapter 462. Landlord. Your surname is Yu? Fang Xian didn't know when he stopped, and looked at the girl in the costume with great interest. Yes, it is. Uzilo raised his head and finally saw the true face of the senior. The tattered beggar's clothes, but the material should be very good. The beard on his face has not been shaved for an unknown period of time, so he can't see his true face clearly, but his eyes are as bright as stars, and like a dark sky, containing indescribable horror. Uzilo quickly lowered her head and took another look. She felt that her own soul would be sucked into the dark vortex. It's so fast, in the blink of an eye, it's been so many years. Fang Xian sighed, embarrassingly. This senior, is there any old relationship with my family's ancestors? Uzilo bit her lower lip and asked curiously. But if it is old with the ancestors, shouldn't it be worshipped at the next level? The ancestors of this level, the youngest one has died for hundreds of years. That's right, after I got to see my old friend today, I have a problem on my mind. Fang Xian took out a scroll of scriptures. This scroll is the method of cultivating immortals in the fairy land of Shu Mountain. It can only be cultivated to the soul, and it's not that outstanding, so I'll give it to you. The exercises he created himself have too many hidden dangers, so it is better not to use them to harm others. However, Fang Xian has been reincarnated for many generations and has a rich collection. This volume of Daoist scriptures is also the spoils of war when he killed the quartet in Shushan. Now that Xinwu Kingdom and Shushan Wonderland have merged, they will definitely be able to use it. What? It's actually a cheat book for cultivating immortals, and you can still practice all the way to the supreme realm of the primordial spirit. Uzilo took it, his hands trembling. Xinwu country is small and poor, and more importantly, there are no spiritual veins and special products, so those who cultivate immortals don't look down on them at all. Even those at the top can only get the inheritance of casual cultivators who are not popular, and often treat them as treasures. Can cultivate all the way to Yuan Shen. That is already the most extreme skill. Could it be, this senior is also a cultivator, so he can live so long? Looking at Fang Xian, Uzilo suddenly had an idea. The primordial spirit, is considered the ultimate state? Don't those immortals who have crossed the tribulation and ascended don't want to lose face? Fang Xian laughed. Well, my little girl has heard of it. It is said that in the fairy land of Mount Chu, ever since a peerless monster appeared and broke the cycle of reincarnation, the world has changed drastically, the road to immortality has been cut off, and no one can become immortal anymore. Uzilo replied tremblingly. So that's how it is, but it's not bad to become a primordial spirit. Your future cultivation depends entirely on yourself. Fang Xian waved his hand, and the figure disappeared. Uzilo felt lost. Senior, you haven't mentioned your name yet. It's a pity that besides her, there is no other figure in the Patriarch Hall at this time. The ferry road is cut off? At this time, Fang Xian had arrived at the gate of Yueshan County City, looking up at the sky. His eyesight was beyond that of ordinary people, and he seemed to be able to see a sword light, and a smile could not help but appear on the corner of his mouth. It's true, that devil, is back. Zhang Jianzi controlled the flying sword and ran wildly all the way. He was in his 30s, with fluttering sleeves and a fairy-like air, but at this moment he wished he could control two flying swords and escape from this place far away. Zhang Jianzi is a foreign affairs disciple of the Shushan Sword School, and he has supernatural powers. If these disciples are placed in the fairy land of Shu Mountain, they are all loose immortals, and they can enjoy hundreds of years of life. If they go to the palace of Xinwu Kingdom, everyone from the Queen Mother to the Emperor will pay tribute to them. However, Xi and Wukyo's aura is poor, even those who have just cultivated mana and just entered the Tao, they don't want to stay here for too long. The reason why Zhang Jianzi lurks here is naturally for a mission, a great shame for the Shushan sword sect. Back then, reincarnation was broken, and after the change of heaven, the immortal roads in the Shushan world were cut off, but many small thousand worlds were merged. The other small worlds are just average, but this Xinwu kingdom's territory is fine, but there is a legendary figure named Beihu Zian Junfang Xian. This name is already a taboo in the Shushan world. Back then, when the two primordial gods and Taoists died, Zhuge Wengxian, the new head teacher of the Shushan sword sect, ordered many people to inquire whether its appearance, name, or even personality. Xi and Wukyo's former Beihu Zian Jun seems to be the same person as the devil who caused the reincarnation catastrophe. Even the time is roughly right. For mortals, it is unbelievable that a person is reborn in another world after death. But for immortal cultivators, this is already understood. At that time, someone in the Shushan sword sect threatened to wipe out the golden wind and light rain upstairs and down, and kill everyone. But Zhu Yingzi strongly opposed it, and the Shushan sword sect was not a magic sect after all, and the people in the golden wind and drizzle tower had nothing to do with Fang Xian, so they finally escaped. However, Zhuge Wengxian intensively cultivated the secrets of heaven, but felt that in the golden wind and drizzle tower, he might be able to find key clues about the devil in the future, so he issued a mission in the sect. There have always been disciples of the Shushan sword sect, lurking in Xinwu kingdom, on the one hand to monitor the golden wind and light rain tower, and on the other hand to perform the duties of the righteous Dao sect and monitor the quartet. Zhang Jianzi didn't take it seriously at first. If it wasn't for the mission, he wouldn't have come to such a small place that was almost a place of nowhere. But I didn't expect that today it seemed that he really met the real master. That figure like a demon god, even if he just glanced at it with his divine sense, almost made him go mad. At this moment, I felt like crying without tears. Obviously the previous senior brothers have done well, why is it my turn? Zhang Jianzi tried his best to use a few ways to stimulate vitality, but he only had one thought: hurry up. Hurry up. I don't want to see that murderous person who broke the cycle of reincarnation. No, didn't the devil say that he had died in the sky back then? Is it under the catastrophe? Unfortunately, most of the monks of the same generation have passed their lifespan, so they can only ask the head teacher. Zhang Jianzi flew thousands of miles in one breath, and was lucky to escape, when suddenly he saw a multicolored fog in front of him. As soon as he pressed the sword light, he wanted to go around in a circle. The colorful mist didn't show any politeness to him, and spread over directly. When you look carefully, you will find that it is a group of colorful moths. They flap their wings and sprinkle colorful powder, covering the sky and the sun. How strange, can moths catch up to my flying sword? Zhang Jianzi shook his head, could it be some monster? In normal times, with the flying sword in hand, he would dare to fight even the golden core, but today is really not the time. With his sword light protecting his body, he wanted to avoid it far away. But suddenly, he saw those moths gathered together, which seemed to form a colorful giant eye. The giant eyes were indifferent and ruthless, and with extreme magic, they glanced at him indifferently. Like many moths to a flame, they flew towards him. They regarded the sword light as nothing, and one of them jumped directly into Zhang Jianzi's mouth. Vomit. Zhang Jianzi clutched his throat, his eyes suddenly went dark. The moths and giant eyes just now, all disappeared, as if they were just a dream.